Unintelligible Navajo radio transmission.
By 1945, Japanese cryptographers had broken or compromised nearly every American military code they encountered. They cracked naval ciphers. They anticipated troop movements. They read American intentions before American soldiers could act on them. Every code the United States built, Japan eventually dismantled. Every code but one. The Japanese signals intelligence officers who spent the war trying to decode a particular string of transmissions from the Pacific Theater later described them as, and this is their own word, noise. Not a code, not a pattern, just noise. They were wrong. What they were hearing was Navajo. And the men speaking it had been recruited specifically because the United States government understood something devastating. They had spent 40 years trying to make that language disappear, and they had failed. To understand what the Navajo Code Talkers were asked to do, you have to understand what had already been done to them. Beginning in the 1870s, the United States government pursued a deliberate policy toward Native American languages. The goal was elimination. Children were taken from their families, sometimes by force, and placed in federal boarding schools where speaking their native language was a punishable offense. The motto of the most prominent of these institutions was explicit: kill the Indian, save the man. Navajo children were beaten for speaking Navajo. By 1940, the Navajo Nation had been living under this pressure for generations. The language had survived, passed quietly, kept alive in homes and ceremonies, but the people who carried it had done so at enormous cost. Then the war came, and the United States military, facing an encryption crisis in the Pacific, sent a recruiter to the Navajo Nation with an unusual proposition. We need your language, the one we spent 40 years trying to destroy. The idea came from a civil engineer named Philip Johnston. He was not Navajo. He was the son of a missionary who had grown up on the reservation and was one of perhaps 30 non-Navajo people in the country who spoke the language fluently. In early 1942, Johnston brought his idea to Major General Clayton Vogel at Camp Elliott in California. His pitch was direct. Navajo is unlike any other language in the world. It has no written form. Its syntax, tonal structure, and vocabulary have no relationship to any European or Asian language. It would take a foreign cryptographer years of immersion just to begin to understand it. And even then, regional dialects within the language add another layer of complexity that makes external decryption functionally impossible. Vogel authorized a test. Johnston recruited 4 Navajo men to demonstrate the concept. They transmitted a military message in Navajo. A trained American cryptographer received it, translated it back to English. It took 20 seconds. The same message, using the military's standard cipher equipment, took 30 minutes. Vogel sent his recommendation up the chain immediately. The Marine Corps authorized the program in May 1942. The first 29 Navajo recruits reported for duty that summer. They were called the First 29. The code they built was not simply Navajo, it was Navajo transformed into a military cipher. The First 29 developed a substitution system layered on top of the language itself. Military terms that had no Navajo equivalent were assigned code words drawn from Navajo vocabulary. A submarine became Beshlo, iron fish. A fighter plane became Daheti High, hummingbird. A battleship became Lotso, whale. They built an alphabet system using Navajo words as letter substitutes, multiple options for common letters to prevent pattern recognition. They memorized the entire code. Nothing was written down. No code book existed that could be captured. The code lived only in the minds of the men who carried it. By the end of the war, approximately 420 Navajo men had served as code talkers. They operated in every Marine division, every Marine Raider battalion, every Marine parachute unit in the Pacific Theater. They transmitted messages under fire, often with no cover, speaking into radio handsets while artillery fell around them. Major Howard Connor, the signal officer for the 5th Marine Division at Iwo Jima, employed 6 Navajo Code Talkers working around the clock during the battle's most critical hours. When the island was secured, Connor made a statement that has since become one of the most quoted assessments of the program.
Were it not for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima.
Iwo Jima, February 1945. The island was 8 square miles of volcanic rock and entrenched Japanese defenses. The Marines knew going in that it would cost them. What they could not have predicted was how much. 6,121 Americans died in 36 days. The battle required the kind of precise, constant communication that could not afford a single intercepted transmission. Troop positions, artillery coordinates, medical evacuations, supply routes, all of it passed through the Code Talkers. Think about what that meant for the men doing it. They were Marines. They were under fire. They were also the most critical communication link in the entire operation, carrying the weight of thousands of lives in the words they chose, in the accuracy of every transmission, in the speed of every relay. One Code Talker described spending 3 days without sleep at Iwo Jima, transmitting continuously, one hand on the radio, the other sometimes pressed flat against the ground to feel for incoming artillery. His name was Harold Foster. He was 19 years old. When the war ended, the Code Talkers came home, and then the government classified the program. For 23 years, the Navajo Code Talkers could not speak about what they had done, not to their families, not to their communities, not to anyone. The code was considered too valuable to risk exposing. The military wanted the option to use it again. So the men who had given years of their lives, who had transmitted messages under fire, who had helped secure some of the most consequential battles of the Pacific War, they came home to a country that still, in many states, would not allow them to vote. They came home to the same reservation, the same poverty, the same federal policies that had spent decades attempting to erase the very thing the military had just asked them to risk their lives to use. They could not speak of it. Chester Nez, one of the original First 29, later wrote that the silence was its own kind of weight, that he carried what he'd seen and done in the Pacific for decades without being able to explain it to the people closest to him. He was not bitter about the secrecy, he said. He understood the necessity. But the country's silence about what had been done to his people, the schools, the beatings, the language prohibition, that silence was different. That silence was not classified. That silence was chosen. In 1968, the program was declassified. In 2001, 56 years after the end of the war, the United States Congress awarded the Congressional Gold Medal to the original 29 Navajo Code Talkers. The remaining survivors attended the ceremony. Many of the original 29 had already died. The medals were real. The recognition was genuine. And none of it could give back the decades. None of it could undo the boarding schools. None of it could return the children who had been punished for speaking the very language that, when the country needed it most, proved to be the only thing Japanese cryptographers could not crack. The irony is not subtle. The weapon was the wound. Chester Nez, John Benally, Charlie Begay, David Curley, Lowell Damon, James Dixon, Carl Gorman, Oscar Ilthma, Alan Dale June, Alfred Leonard, Johnny Manuelito, William McCabe, Roy Noda, Jack Nez, Lloyd Oliver, Tillman Sage, Samuel Tso, Nelson Thompson, Harry Tsozi, John Willie, William Yazzie. These are some of the names, not all of them. There were more than 400 men, and history did not preserve all of them with equal care. But their language survived. The one the United States tried to silence, it survived. And when the world needed something unbreakable, that was the thing they reached for. The Navajo Code Talkers did not save the Pacific War alone. History is never that clean. But they transmitted the words that moved the troops, called the coordinates, ordered the evacuations, held the line. They did it in a language that was almost taken from them. They did it for a country that had not yet decided to treat them as full citizens. And then they came home and kept the secret for 23 years. Say their names. Know what they carried. and understand that the language the government tried to kill was the same language that helped win the war. That is not a footnote. That is the whole story.